Hello everyone, and welcome to this tutorial video on APA citation standards. I am Ashley Squires, the director of the Writing Center here at Avila University, and today I'm going to show you how to cite a source in your text using APA format. So let's quickly review the reasons why it's important to cite your sources. So first of all, citing a source gives credit to that person for their original ideas and words. When you cite a source, you're acknowledging that those ideas, that information came from somewhere else and are the intellectual property of the original author. Secondly, citing a source helps your reader understand where your information is coming from. So if the reader is interested in following up on an example you provide or knowing more about where a statistic or a fact comes from, then showing your source allows them to verify it on their own. And finally, citing sources enhances your credibility as a writer by basically showing that you've done the work, that you've done rigorous research, and that you're in conversation with what other people have written about your topic. So what counts as citation? Typically, when we cite a source, we need to do three things. If we are directly quoting from our source, then we need to use quotation marks. We need to use an in-text or a parenthetical citation anytime we quote, paraphrase, or discuss a source in our writing. And that looks a little bit like this. And we also need to include a reference page, which looks kind of like this. So this video is going to cover item number 2. In-text citations, we're going to cover the basics of reference lists in a whole separate video. One thing you should be aware of before we dive in is that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of different citation systems out there. At some point in your school career, you might have learned MLA format. You have probably also seen Chicago Notes and Bibliography format, the one that uses footnotes in use before. All of these citation standards are provided by different publishers and academic organizations. So the Chicago University Press publishes the Chicago Manual of Style. The Modern Languages Association publishes the MLA Handbook, and the American Psychological Association is responsible for the APA Handbook. So which citation system professionals use depends basically on where they're publishing. Different journals have different requirements, but certain formats tend to dominate within certain disciplines. So Chicago and MLA, for example, are commonly used in the humanities, while APA is really the format of choice in the social sciences. So for you as a student, which format you pick depends largely on what your instructor or your program wants. And if your instructor wants you to write an APA, then this is what you need to do. So as I said, an in-text or parenthetical citation needs to be provided anytime you quote, you paraphrase, or you discuss a source in your text. Okay, so even if you're not directly quoting, you still need to provide a parenthetical citation, even if you're just summarizing or referring to a source indirectly. So to do it, you generally need 3 pieces of information. You need the last name of the author, you need the year that the source was published, and if you're directly quoting from the source or referring to a piece of information that you found on a specific page, then you need the page number. So how you format a parenthetical citation differs based on the way you present the source in your text. And this is what makes APA different from MLA format. And it's also what can make APA a little bit annoying if you are used to MLA format. But I'm going to try to guide you through the basics of how to do this, so hopefully it isn't too frustrating in the future. Let's start with the author's name. So the last name of the author can appear in one of 2 places. It can either appear in parentheses at the end of the clause in which the source is referred to, and the name of the author can also appear in the text itself, so as part of your writing. This gives you a choice. If you decide that you want to mention the name of the author in the original text, then you can use what's called an attributive tag, or a signal phrase that points to the author as the source of the quote or the idea. So the advantage of this is that it helps integrate the attribution seamlessly into the grammar of the sentence. In the Writing Center, we actually have a PDF handout full of attributive tags if you want some ideas. And depending on how you're accessing this video, you can find this handout either in a link in the description of this video or by visiting our website. So if you use an attributive tag, then the only information that needs to appear in the parentheses is the year and the page number. And you'll notice that these are separate. We'll talk about that in a second. However, if you feel like an attributive tag is just going to make your sentence clunky, you don't want to mention the author's name in your sentence, then you can choose to simply include the author's name in a single parenthetical citation at the very end of the sentence. So one thing you should know is that in the sciences, it's very common for research to be performed collaboratively. And therefore, it's common for articles to have multiple authors. So if there are, and this is what you do, if there's two authors, then you should always refer to both of them using and when it's written out in the text, A-N-D, and an ampersand in parenthetical citations. If there are three or more authors, then you list only the first author's name, followed by et al., which is an abbreviation of et alia, which is a Latin phrase that just translates to and others. So pay attention to the punctuation here and note that the period is only after al, because that's the only word that's actually abbreviated. You would also never write and et al. Or ampersand et al. Because et is Latin for and that would just be repetitive. Let's move on to the year. APA is also different from MLA in that it requires you to include the year of publication in the in-text citation. And this is because, in general, research in the sciences tends to become outdated much more quickly than it does in the humanities. And therefore, readers care a lot about whether you are citing the most recent sources. The year always goes in parentheses and can appear in one of two places depending on the choice you've made about the author's name. So if you chose to use an attributive tag with the author's name as part of the sentence, then the year goes in parentheses right after the author's name. If you made the choice to put the author's name in parentheses at the end of the sentence, then the year goes right alongside it, separated by a comma. But this is the rule to remember. The year is always in parentheses, and it always follows the author. Okay? One additional note about the year. It's sometimes the case that you are using a book that's been through multiple editions, like this is the copyright page from a textbook that we use here. So if you turn to the copyright page looking for the date that something was published, you might see several dates. In general, you should always use the date of the edition that you are reading and using for information, which is always the most recent date on the copyright page. So if you see a lot of dates and you're wondering which one to use the most recent one, because that's usually the date of the edition that you are reading. Okay, moving on to page number. If you are using a direct quote or referring to a piece of information that comes from a specific part of the source, then you should always include a page number if one is available. And here's, again, the annoying thing. For some web-based resources, you don't have page numbers. But usually in that case, it means that the source is pretty short. And if somebody wanted to search for some keywords, they could pretty easily find the quote. So you don't need to provide a page number if the page number is not available. But if you're using a print source, if you're using a book or even an article that you obtained online, but is part of a PDF that has page numbers, then you should always include the page number so that somebody could go find that quote if they wanted to. The page number always, always, always appears at the end of the clause in which the quote or the reference to the source occurs. Okay, so notice here that even when you change your strategy with regard to the author's name, the page number doesn't move. However, sometimes when we talk about a source, we aren't necessarily referring to a specific quote or referring to a piece of information that appears on a particular page. We're just kind of referring to the whole argument that the author makes or discussing a piece of research in general. And in fact, this is really common in some social science writing, especially in literature reviews, where you're just like providing a list of additional supporting citations to demonstrate what research has been done on a particular topic. So in cases like this, you don't need to include a page number. You would just include the author's last name and the year in parentheses like this. Okay, so this is just the basics, but it should be enough to enable you to format almost any in-text citation in APA. In the Writing Center, we have also created this quick reference sheet for you, which again, you can access in the description if you're watching this on YouTube or just by navigating to our website. It contains the most common cases you will encounter. And so you can keep this in your binder, you can tape it to your wall, you can have it open on your computer desktop, whatever helps, just so that you don't have to go through pages and pages and pages of the APA manual in order to find what you want. Sometimes, however, you are going to encounter those less common cases, and it's important to know that you can just Google for these when they arise. Nobody memorizes this stuff. Even people who write in APA style professionally have to look things up all the time, and there's absolutely no shame in doing so. Just get used to doing it when you need to. And of course, if you ever get confused or if you want somebody to answer your questions about all of this, feel free to come to the Writing Center or make an appointment with us on Navigate, and we will do our best to help. Thank you.